Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Construction Business Management. In this video lecture, we're going to be looking at, do you understand your customer? Really, when it comes down to marketing and construction business success, you need to know who your customer is and what's driving them. It's very important to do that. And do you really know who your customer is? Do you understand who they are? Do you understand what their needs are? Because if you really don't, how are you going to be successful at satisfying those needs? And if you do satisfy those needs, you may have a customer for life, and that's going to really build your business and drive your business. So today's video lecture, we're going to look at 4 ways to increase sales and profit, and we're going to define the consumer, what exactly that means, and we're going to look at 2 models, the business to customer model and the business to business model. In the construction field, each one of them are huge marketplaces, and you have to determine, what is your focus, or do you have a multi-pronged approach to your business and to who your customers are? Kind of depends on who your customers are and the type of work you intend to do. So we'll look at a few different examples along that path. So there's 4 ways to increase sales and profit. Really, fundamentally, there is only 4 ways to do this. And we've talked about financial statements in the previous lectures and videos. If you haven't seen them, I'll put a description and links to them in the description. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you look under the Construction Business Management playlist, you'll see all the videos in this particular course. So it's easy to access that way. All right. So getting to the 4 ways to increase sales. And as I mentioned in previous, we talked about income statements and developing a business plan and trying to have a pro forma looking forward 3 to 5 years. What is your expectation as far as sales? What are you setting for your goals to try to achieve? Well, if you want to increase sales and ergo also profit, assuming that you're making a profit on each sale, and we talked about markup, etc., during that video, you need to do one of 4 things. Increase your client base. All right. If you have 100 clients right now, can you increase that to 150 or 110? Whatever that amount may be. If you really want to increase sales and profit, that's one way for sure to do it. And then there's, of course, the marketing that requires you to be successful at adding those client numbers. So it takes a lot of work and effort, but that's a real possibility. If you have more clients, then you can increase sales and profit. One of the good things about that is it helps to diversify your portfolio. If you have a lot of clients and you lose a couple of them for a variety of reasons, they retire, they sell their property, they move away, etc., it's not a big deal because you've got a lot of clients. On the other hand, if you've got one big client and you lose that one big client, your business is in for a heap of trouble. So there's a lot of advantages to having diversification in that area. The other thing is you could raise your prices. It's surprising how often construction owners, they undervalue the work that they do and the service that they provide. There's people out there that work for cash and under the table and things of that nature, and in the construction field for sure. And some contractors, sometimes they have the mentality that if they don't have low prices, they're not going to get the work. Well, that's not true. And if you're good at what you do and you position yourself right and you go after the right customers, you definitely have the opportunity to raise your prices and ensure that you're charging an adequate amount to make the profit targets that you're after. So that's one easy way for sure to increase your profitability, by increasing your pricing. And even if you had the same amount of customers, your overall sales income on the year would go up. If you upped it 10% or 20%, if you've been undercharging, maybe you haven't been covering your overhead from past years, etc. Increase the frequency of transactions per customer. So if you can get from the 100 customers you have, or the 10 customers you have, or clients that you have, if you can get them to buy more frequently from you, then that is going to definitely grow your business. And a lot of people will leverage that. They may start off in one kind of business and see that, well, I've got this really good client base. And if I added this to the offerings of what we do, that would increase our overall sales revenue, which would, of course, increase our profitability. So if we think about it in those terms, if we increase the frequency of transactions per customer, that can be a really good avenue. Well, what might that look like? How might that work? Well, perhaps you started out in the landscaping business and you just actually mowed lawns and planted flowers and shrubs. Well, you probably have a pretty good client base. So if you added to the services that you offer, say exterior decks and flagstone and any gazebos, you name it, outside, driveways, walkways, you've got a good client base that you've built trust with. You've been cutting their grass, you've been doing their plantings, you've built a strong relationship. The first person they're going to think about when they want to do a new deck or put in a new driveway or put in a new walkway, it's going to be you. So that would definitely increase your just regular revenue streams to another whole area of revenue streams. Could work in reverse too. Could be that you're doing decks and you're doing walkways and that sort of thing. And now you start to offer a landscaping service. You've already got this clientele built up. They would be very likely to want to do work with you. So you can see how that's one way of increasing the frequency of transactions per customer. You got to be pretty thoughtful about it, and depending what your niche is, it'll become more self-evident to you. So if you know your niche, because there's so many different niches in construction, then you can start to look at related areas. It's one of the reasons why you see that there's been an amalgamation over the years of the bigger building systems contractors like electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. So basically your mechanicals, your MEP contractors. Originally in big urban centers anyways, there was a plumbing contractor, there was an HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contractor, there was an electrical contractor. Lately, I've seen a number of amalgamations on the high end, the larger companies. So if you actually build a hospital, a GC, they might be very much want to align with a conglomerate that does all of those services, which is obviously it's increasing the frequency of transactions because now if I want plumbing, I'm going to you. If I want HVAC, I'm going to you. If I want electrical, but when I want all of them, I'm not going to 3 separate contractors. It also makes it much easier for a GC to coordinate all of that kind of work. It also opens up opportunities for things like P3s, which would be private-public partnerships, and having key building systems contractors involved. So there's different opportunities in increasing the frequency, whether you're small or whether you're big. Those are the ways that that can be utilized. Increase the average size of each transaction by increasing what you sell, often called upselling. Well, that is where you are selling something and you're offering other extras and options. For example, if you are a production home builder, you build hundreds or thousands of homes a year, even fewer than that. And you have a client that they want to purchase a house. Well, you have a base price that you sell the house at. And with that house, you get carpeting on the first floor, you get certain colors of paint, you get a plastic laminate countertop and a certain level of quality of cabinets. Oh, now you bought the house. Well, you can certainly go with that carpet, Mr. or Mrs. X, but you may be interested in this beautiful pre-finished hardwood flooring that's made out of quarter cut oak. And it costs X amount of dollars. So the carpet maybe cost $12 a square foot and the hardwood costs $25 a square foot. That would be a way of increasing the average size of transaction. In fact, most home builders, when they're doing these kind of projects, they target a certain amount of upselling in their decor centers when clients make their selections. So they go through a lot of time and effort making sure that their options and extras are really good for those houses. So it'll be very enticing for those clients to take it. Because it's the best time when you're going to buy a house is to get those extra items. It's more difficult after you move in, and you know how it is. You move in and then nobody wants to do anything after they move in. So you really sort of have a great opportunity there, and you can have higher margins, profit margins on those type of items, as long as you don't make it so high that it makes sense for the client to say, well, forget it, we'll just rip out the carpet when we move in and we'll put the hardwood because it's cheaper. So you find your actual price points that make sense, that you're probably still fairly high on price, but from a competitive point of view, it doesn't make sense with the client going with the base and then later on upgrading. So there's ways of thinking about the upselling process. It's not only in home building. You can think about it pretty much in any marketplace that you're working in, that you can offer other options and extras. They usually call it O&Es, options and extras. So that's a few of them. Now, each of these examples really requires you to know and understand your customer really well. So if I was going to be offering certain options and extras, well, who am I selling to? Is this a condominium building that's targeted at a mature age group, or is it a condominium building that is targeted at basically a younger demographic who doesn't have as much money? That would be significant, right? So if it was in a very sort of wealthy area and you were targeting very high-end clients, that would change the offerings too. But definitely you'd want to look at that and what's the best mix that would be attracted to that they could actually afford, and that would be the offering mix that you would want to think about. So these are really, when it comes down to it, these are pretty good examples of thinking about your clients and trying to understand them. Like I said, what's the age demographic typically? It may be a big mix, and so that may cloud it a little bit, but then okay, well, what's the target price range in here? So what's the earning power of these clients? That would change that as well, the dynamic towards that. Consumers, let's talk a little bit about consumers, right? Really, when we think about consumers, we can go through this. People with needs and the means and willingness to satisfy those needs. So that means that they can afford what it is that you're providing. They have certain needs. They also have certain wants. And understanding the difference between the two is important as well when you're trying to sell things. And there is a willingness that they actually want to go through with this. That's a consumer, right? People who buy or who have the capacity to buy goods and services offered for sale by businesses. So again, you have the capacity, you're able to make those decisions in those places along those lines. And there's a distinction to be made between the users and the customers who do the buying. So we can think about this as breaking it up into two areas. We can think of what we call a B2B or a B2C. A B2B simply means it's one business to another business. The transaction is taking place between one business to another business. A B2C is it's from one business to a customer or a client, an individual, if you want to think of it that way. So what is our market? Are we dealing with another business or are we dealing with a customer? Because how we go about getting the other business or getting the other customer is likely to be quite different in how we do that. If we think about the B2C, that is the customer is an individual, and there's certainly potential for repeat business with that customer and referrals, but going after and trying to accumulate those types of customers is different than a business, right? So you really have to determine who your customer is and how to effectively market to that individual. Like, who are they and how do we actually what's the best way to market to them? And in this video and the next video, we'll get into that in a little bit more detail, right? Answer the question of where would that customer look if they needed the product that you provide, right? Where would they go looking? It's a big question. You're them. How would you go about finding another contractor, right? And there's a list of items I've got in another slide coming up where we go through that. But really getting in their headspace. Why would they want to do work with you? But how would they find you in the first place? How would they even know about you? What is the process or opportunities for that? So over the next few lectures, we'll get into that in more detail. One of the things though is if you're looking at, say, in the residential sector, you're looking at kind of individuals, right? So, or families. And that customer may do work, but they may not do work again for a year or two or a few years in between. If you do a really good job, they'll always come to you. But if you also do a really good job, they will tend to refer you to other people, friends, relatives, etc. But you have to do a really good job for those referrals. If it's just kind of an average job, they will probably not speak up as much about you. If you do a really good job, they'll be like, my contractor did this, my contractor did that. Oh, you got to get my contractor, because they really like to sort of say it's their contractor that did this, right? And that can be, that's what you want. That's what you want. You want clients, customers for life wherever possible, because you do have to advertise to get these customers. These customers don't just follow thin air, especially in the beginning. You know, it's okay they ask a friend or relative, but if you haven't done any work before, how do they know about you? So it really takes a little bit of traction to get that moving. Business to business. Okay, business to business. This is an interesting sector. And not that the previous one isn't. It's a big sector, the previous one, to be sure. But business to business, it's like we're working with another business. So if I'm a masonry subcontractor, I give the example, I might target new infill housing. Infill housing's, where in an urban center you tear down an existing house. It's old. It no longer serves its highest and best use. Highest and best use is a real estate term that means each property has a highest and best use. So if I buy a property and I'm a developer, I look at that and I say, what can I build here that will give me the biggest return on my investment, right? And we talked about ROI, and we look at that, right? Should I put in a house? Can I put in a commercial building? What's the zoning limitations? All of that comes into it. So if I'm a masonry subcontractor, I might target new infill housing. Not that I want to make those decisions, but somebody has to do the brickwork on those houses that are being infilled. All right, so then the next question is, well, who does that? And so then I would look at offering my masonry services to custom and spec builders. Custom builder is somebody buys a property, they hire a consultant, they get a GC, and then that GC contracts all the work out to the various trade partners, and they build the house. So if I'm a masonry contractor, who would be the company that I would be employed by for this contract? It would be the general contractor. So I would look at getting myself aligned with those GCs that do those infill housing projects. Or if it's done straight by the developer, I would look at who is the developers that do these infill projects and get in with them. If I get in with them, if I get 7 or 8 builders who each build 6 houses a year, I will have the start of a pretty good business, because if they're doing 8 builders and they're doing 6 houses a year, that's 48 houses that I would be able to do the brickwork on. So that's a pretty good start to a business. That's going to keep me and a crew busy for quite a bit of time. So I've just got a business, but I have to do a good enough job that each one of those builders will want to get me for the next one and the next one and the next one. And occasionally one of the builders will go bankrupt. One of them, maybe you won't have a dispute. Maybe they'll think you're too expensive, whatever. You might lose some here and there, but you'll also gain some. And if you want to expand your business, you look at trying to get more builders, going back to what we said as the 4 ways. One of the ways is to increase the number of clients, right? So clients can be a business that you're dealing with. So you'll need to figure out what you need to do to satisfy them and execute on that. You'll also need to develop a plan for contracting them and being able to offer them quotes. You'll have to have all of your systems worked out so that you can do that pretty efficiently. Now, I said a masonry subcontractor. You could substitute any trade partner in that I just mentioned. So plumber, electrician, same deal, right? You know, your electrical company, you could figure that out. So business to business, all of a sudden, if I get in with enough contractors, I've got a good business going. And if you've got quite a few of them, you've got a really good business because you've got some diversification going. If you've got one contractor who builds, 48 houses a year and you're doing all the masonry work for them, well, yeah, you're doing pretty much the same in sales as the one that has 7 or 8. And you know what? It's probably even more efficient. You're just dealing with this one contractor. But what if that contractor goes bankrupt? What if that contractor you have some sort of dispute with? You've kind of put all your eggs in one basket, which is kind of risky from a business perspective. So you want to understand that if that's what's going on in your business, you might want to say, I need to get a little bit more revenue streams going here because we're too dependent on this one contractor. That's the other thing you have to think about when you're looking at who is your customer. If it's one customer or it's not very diversified, what are some of the things that could negatively impact us, right? So what's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities? What's the threats here we'd really want to focus in on? Because that helps you to better come up with a good composition of trades. Business, as I said, business to business. Oh, and it could be a designer. You could put that in there. Could be a GC to a corporation or a government entity. So another example of doing that would be, let's say that you do work for one college. So you have this college, and because I used to, at one time, I was acting director at my college, George Brown College, and at one time I was actually project manager for our technology division, working with facilities and the construction project. And that was quite interesting because I was very used to being a contractor, not used to putting the other hat on and looking at it from the other perspective. And you quickly understand that there's certain things that you want from those contractors. Like if I'm a contractor and I'm going to work for a facilities team at a college, what would they want? Looking at it from their perspective, well, they would want you to work very safely. And by safely, I mean not only for your own employees, but to make sure that whatever work you're doing, because you're going to have the public, you're going to have students wandering around, that you do that impeccably. They're going to want that. They're going to want you to come when you say you're going to come and to finish when you say you're going to finish, because they work on very, very tight timelines. They're going to have specific hours that you can do specific things. So for example, during exam week, they're not going to want you with a hammer drill in the room above where there's an exam going on. So there's a lot of more flexibility that they're going to expect from you. If you're following those rules and you're interacting with everyone, and what you really want to think about is that facilities manager, I want to make their life easy. If I make their life easy, they're going to want to have me come back. If I make their life difficult, they're not going to want me back. And there's different levels of projects that go in a college building. There'll be definitely ones that are lump sum based on lowest bid, and you can get pre-qualified for them and bid on them. And if you are the lowest bid, but to get pre-qualified, you got to meet certain rigorous standards, which means not just anybody is throwing in prices. You can get at that level. If you're getting that level, you can also do smaller work, right? And the smaller work very often, it may require extra prices, but it can be really come down to if you're the preferred contractor that for smaller amounts that can get in and out, you'll get that type of work. So there's different levels of work that's going on. Well, you know what? If you get into one college, you can leverage that to get into another college, right? You built a good relationship. You can ask that facilities manager if you can use them as a referral. You can go knocking on doors at the facilities departments of other colleges. You can use that to build a portfolio on what you've done in this college. And that's very recognizable. That's how you can actually leverage that. So if you get one really good sort of high profile client, you can really leverage that to get other work. So then you get 2 colleges, then you get 3 colleges. And you know what? Through that process, you're getting very good at working through the organizations, through the facilities departments, knowing how the pluses and minuses and what you can and can't do. So now you're actually building efficiencies and systems and productivity levels that now you're very competitive on bidding on those projects. And you can expand. What's something similar to colleges, universities, or schools? Those skills can be transferred out. There'll be differences, but they can be transferred out. Not big differences between colleges and universities, but big differences between high schools, let's say, or middle schools. So those would be some examples of business to business if it was a government entity. The other might be a corporation, or it could be some retail store or restaurant of that nature. And again, you're going to be selling directly to these businesses, building a brand reputation, having a presence, and knocking on doors when it's a business to business type relationship, knocking on the right doors and using other people that are in that field to help you in many cases because they may have contacts. So business to business type relationships are typically much more long term in the sense that there's a lot of repetition in the work, right? So we talked about, well, if you get more work from them, well, there is ongoing work. I had clients that I remember, it was Metro Housing at the time, and they always had these offices, their maintenance offices, and there's tons of them all around the city, and it was kind of interesting. One year there'd be a new central manager come in and they say, well, we want to move the office from this end of the building to the other end of the building because it's got a little bit better something or other. Fine, no problem. We price it out. We do it. 3 years later, oh, we want to move the office from this end of the building back to that end of the building. Fine, no problem. We'll, it was good, great work and ongoing work, and you had those relationships. You had to bid on them, but you were bidding against similar contractors that had similar, all the other costing features, similar overhead. So if you knew what you were doing, you definitely got your share of work, and it was fine. So that's a business, looking at it from that perspective. Business to business type relationship is typically more long term, but you can definitely lose that aspect on the business to business if, say, that facility manager moves and they go to another place. That's usually the biggest issue because you built a relationship with that facility manager for that company. Somebody else comes in and they had a relationship with other contractors wherever they were. So then they want to bring their contractors in. And so often, if you don't do a really good job at selling yourself right from the get-go, you might lose that particular job. But on the other hand, you'd be surprised when that person goes to another company, then they're looking for contractors that they know as opposed. So the same thing goes. So if you did a really good relationship, you keep in contact with them, all of a sudden, all right, they left that college, they got into this college, now you can get work at this college. If you do a really good job, you keep the work at this college and you get the work at that college, and then you've got both of them. Even in my area of training and development, I get really good relationships going with basically HR people that are specialists in training and development, and then they tend to move around. When they move around, it's actually a good thing for me because if I do a good job, I keep this work and then I get more work. It's pretty amazing that way when it actually works like an ecosystem and you kind of understand the interworkings of it. So yeah, we can think about differences in customer type. It's good to think in those terms. If you were an architect, I'll throw in an architectural design firm this time, and say you have your own direct clients. Well, that's the other thing. It doesn't have to be all of one and none of the other. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have a mix, right? You can design a mix. You can look at what suits your business better. You might want to have a mix for diversification purposes. If one group's in one sector of the economy and another's in a different sector, well, if that sector has a downturn, this one has an upturn, then that could be beneficial to you. Or it might not have as much of a downturn. So an architectural design firm could have direct clients, could do designs for homes, right? And then they could have contractors that they do designs for homes. Well, if I got these contractors, they're probably getting, a whole bunch of designs every year, but each client's only getting one design, right? And then that's their dream home. They might not want another one forever. So those ones, I would take them, but I'm going to have a mix. And maybe my mix is 50% business from direct clients, 50% business from contractors. Or maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 30% from direct clients and 70% from contractors, or vice versa. There can be a mix in there. It doesn't have to be all or one. But it's kind of understanding that how I get these clients is different than how I get those clients, right? This is going to be more business to business. So there's different ways that I could go after these. I could become a member of a building association, your local home building association, and be very active in it and get to know the contractors and market myself sort of one-on-one with them, get to know who's doing what, and then try to do a sales pitch on my designs to them. That would be one way of growing that more organically. Clients, I got to figure out advertising. How am I going to advertise? Or do I need an architectural office that's in a sort of a main street that people can come in off the street, so to speak? It depends on the business and looking at what suits your business the best. Home builder, renovation contractor. Maybe I've got some clients that I do renovations for. Maybe I do every once in a while a speculation build where I buy the property and build it and sell it. Maybe I'll do the odd custom home, and maybe again I'll do large renovation and addition. So maybe these are like kitchens and bathrooms. This is a speculation build that, because I don't have a ton of money, but I will occasionally buy a property and develop and sell it. And we talked about ROI in previous videos. We know that there's a very high return on investment as long as the market doesn't collapse if we do this one really well. Whereas these, there's lower risk. There's much lower risk. You got a client that's paying you as you go when you do a custom home build. They bought the property. This would be, again, ongoing payments as you continue to do work. So you got different sectors. That might be a makeup. You'll find that in smaller towns, there's a lot more of this sort of mix where you'll do a number of things. In large urban centers, you might find more specialization. I do renovations and additions. I don't really do new homes, but some do. Again, it's what makes sense for you and your skill sets and the marketplace that you're operating in and the clients that you're seeking. ICI, institutional, commercial, industrial contractor. Well, maybe you have a mix of types of projects that you typically do. Maybe you do shopping mall, retail stores, fit outs, finish and fit outs in shopping malls. Maybe like my early example, you do some college work. You also do, but college work on a bigger scale, not little small stuff. We're assuming you're more a mid-size contractor to large size. Box stores. Maybe you have certain clients that you do box stores for. Maybe you also do restaurants and schools. Well, these two are kind of a very common kind of element. But the other ones are somewhat different. So you've got quite a few different things. You might decide, I just want to do one type of client and I want to specialize in restaurants. But if you're ICI, you're probably going to have a little bit more of a mix. You might stick to schools and college buildings and be a focus on that. But you can design what you want to do. But again, be careful that you're not spreading yourself too thin and trying to be everything to everybody. It's hard to do that. It's hard to compete in that marketplace. So that's something that you might want to think about from that perspective in who are the customers, how am I going to get them, how am I going to go after them. But this, you'll notice, would be all business to business, right? This one here is all business to business, and that's typical for ICI contractors, institutional. That's what it is, right? Commercial, industrial. It's either going to be business or school or government agencies or government school boards, etc. So that's sort of the intro to understanding who your customer is, the type of customer, and what's the mix that you're looking for in your business. When you're starting out, you're going to be taking what you can get. It's not like you're going to sit here and say, I want 3 renovations and I want to build 1 home and 1 speculation build. But if you are thinking about in your business plan that you do want to build a spec house on speculation, buy land and build on it, that's an element that you would plan for and you'd have to put away some money for so that you can have enough substantial investment that you have skin in the game that a financial institution will be willing to fund the rest, right? So that would be different in your planning processes for that. Custom home build. Well, maybe I've got to get, in that case, maybe I've got to get in with some architects. And if I can get in with some architects, I can probably be getting these 2 pretty good. So it's really nice when you can kind of basically win on 2 items at once, because this is kind of like I'm going after architects, right? If I can get in with some pretty good architectural firms that when they get their own clients and they want bids on jobs, I bid on them. Of course, you have to prove yourself to them. Usually you start out with some smaller jobs and then they give you opportunity to bid on larger ones. And most architectural firms will be designing new homes, but they'll also do sort of large renovations, additions in those cases. Now, again, your experience level, do you understand the difference between renovations and new home construction? There is a significant difference. So in my mind, there's actually a lot more to know in a large kind of house gut addition than there is in a straight new home build. But a straight new home build generally has different licensing requirements and zoning permit requirements that can be more onerous than what you're used to in the renovation sector. So it's getting used to those dichotomies and differences and knowing your own skill sets. If you're not too skilled in either of those yet, you start small and you start working towards expanding the types of projects that you do if your long-term goal is to get to this kind of level. Right? And at some point you might replan your business plan where you decide, I don't want to do any projects less than $200,000, right? As an example. And then you start focusing in on these things. And then maybe at some point, you know what, renovations, it gets too complicated. There's too many unknowns. You built your business enough that now you're doing more and more of this. So it's different models, understanding your customers and understanding what their needs are. And that's very important to be successful in the construction business. So this is what I wanted to cover today. Hopefully that makes sense for you. And in the next video coming up, we're going to be talking about the basis for the buy or not buy decision-making process. And we'll be looking at 3 customer purchasing models, which will really get into the headspace of your customers as well. So we'll further extend what we've been talking about. I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget to click the subscribe and the notification icons. If you enjoyed this, click a like and give me any feedback or ideas that you may have in the comments, and maybe some of your experiences as we build this community through the various courses. Bye for now.